the measure of progress. Through repeated practice, you will naturally see how all things, the five aggregates and conditioned phenomena, are manifold, impermanent, suffering, and devoid of self. Even without deliberate effort, you will perceive everything as insubstantial and overcome afflictions. After practicing the 4 analytical meditations, one will naturally comprehend the nature of the 5 aggregates. Thus, even without diligent effort, one can perceive all appearances as fragmented and transient. As you become familiar with this practice, you naturally see the 5 aggregates as they truly are. The 5 aggregates are composite. When facing a sentient being, continuously meditate on multiplicity and clearly examine the 32 piles of impure components: body hair, head hair, teeth, nails, skin, flesh, tendons, bones, marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, pleura, spleen, lungs, intestines, intestinal membrane, stomach contents, feces, brain, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, sebum, saliva, mucus, synovial fluid, urine. In the Theravada tradition, one gradually recites and meditates on these components from the inside out: body hair, head hair, teeth, nails, fingernails and toenails, skin, etc. Since childhood, practitioners recite these hundreds or thousands of times and can even enter concentration. While reciting, they meditate according to the text. They first recite body hair, head hair, teeth, nails, skin, and then recite it in reverse. This is how they practice from a young age. To be honest, we haven't laid a solid foundation yet. To progress in spiritual practice, it's essential to follow this approach. Later, we will learn the guide to purifying the mind, which guides us to examine each of the 32 piles of impure components. You can use an illustrated version to practice daily. With consistent training, you will spontaneously see multiplicity even without deliberate effort. At that time, you can truly tame afflictions like greed and anger. Similarly, when reflecting on impermanence, observe how everything is transient from moment to moment. Lastly, meditate on non-self. By separating the aggregate of sensation from self-grasping, we will discover that there is no self in the aggregate of sensation. Observe the aggregate of perception carefully, and we will find that there is no self in it either. Examine the characteristics of the aggregate of mental formations closely. If we fail to recognize the aggregate of mental formations, we cannot discern whether there is a self or not. Without a clear investigation, we cannot uproot self-grasping. Currently, our practice is not proficient enough. Many people only have an intellectual understanding. It's like learning to drive. A person who has just learned to drive knows where the accelerator and brakes are, can drive around in a parking lot, but cannot and dares not drive on the street. Similarly, we have just learned the methods of practice but are not proficient yet. Free from the waves of afflictions, the ocean of the mind becomes serene and calm. This fosters mental self-control, leading to the samadhi of calm abiding. At this point, one has reached a similar state. One experiences a slight meditative concentration. If, with one-pointed concentration, you then examine the nature of the mind, the extraordinary insight of vipassana will arise. When the winds of mistaken attitudes cease and the waves of affliction stop surging, the ocean of the mind becomes clear. This is conducive to attaining samadhi, the enlightened state. By examining the nature of the mind, the insight that penetrates the nature of reality will arise. It's essential to practice continuously. We haven't dedicated sufficient effort to dharma practice. Many people, after learning the methods, stop practicing. This is a significant issue. Those who practice Tai Chi know that initially one's movements are stiff. To master Tai Chi, it's essential to practice daily and cultivate the essence and skills gradually. Similarly, in the Dharma domain, we also need to practice daily. Those who are diligent can swiftly attain this state. This is the entry point shared by all three vehicles. The essentials for purifying the mind is a foundational teaching. Among the 37 factors of enlightenment, the first is the 4 foundations of mindfulness, contemplating the impurity of the body, recognizing suffering in feelings, observing impermanence in the mind, and realizing the absence of self in phenomena. This is what the essentials for purifying the mind is about. Master Oyi stated in his Ningfeng Zonglun, the 4 foundations of mindfulness are the core of the Buddha's teachings. It is the essential path to liberation and the common way to attain enlightenment. This Chinese master also expressed this view, but many people may have forgotten it. Master Oyi was one of the 4 great monks in the late Ming dynasty, not too far from our time. He said the 4 foundations of mindfulness are the core of the Buddha's teachings. Nowadays, many people talk about Zen lightly, but their understanding might be superficial. This teaching is a common preliminary training for practitioners from both Mahayana and Theravada traditions, whether exoteric or esoteric. All illusory phenomena that arise dependently have never arisen since the very dawn of time. Thus, in emptiness, the absence of self in phenomena, they transcend extremes like sameness or difference. This realm beyond dualities is what the Mahayana path aims to realize. This sublime and luminous Dharmadhatu is also known as the Tathagatagarbha. All phenomena that arise dependently have never truly arisen. They are like illusions. Therefore, in emptiness, the absence of self in phenomena, they transcend dualities such as sameness and difference, permanence and annihilation, coming and going. This realm beyond dualities is what the Mahayana path aims to realize, also known as the Buddha nature, sublime and luminous. Once one realizes it, one attains the great nirvana that abides in neither samsara nor nirvana. The supreme purity, the great bliss, the great unconditioned permanence, and the great self with inherent virtues. These are its transcendent and unsurpassable qualities. The 4 qualities of nirvana are supreme purity, great bliss, great unconditioned permanence, and the great self with inherent virtues. 1. Supreme purity. It includes intrinsic purity and purity free from defilements. This is the perfection of purity. The omniscient Mipham Rinpoche stated in the Gateway to Knowledge, those who are inherently pure in Dhammadhatu, with the great wisdom that realizes the two kinds of non-self, have uprooted temporary defilements, the two obscurations and their habitual tendencies. This state, endowed with twofold purity, is the liberated body of perfect purity, or the supremely pure body. It is supremely pure. 2. Great bliss. This refers to being free from two flaws, the gross suffering and its origin, as well as the subtle habitual tendencies of ignorance. Mipham Rinpoche said, not to mention the gross defects of suffering and its origin, even the cause of the mental body, which even the Shravakas cannot eradicate, the habitual tendencies of ignorance are uprooted. Hence, one is free from all suffering of conditioned existence. This state is the perfection of bliss, the body of great bliss. This explains the qualities of permanence, bliss, self, and purity, which the Buddha taught in the Mahaparinibbana Sutra. 3. Great unconditioned permanence. This refers to being free from the two extremes, existence and non-existence. Mipham Rinpoche said, no longer attached to the duality of samsara and nirvana, one realizes great equality, the great, unconditioned, immortal state that dwells in neither existence nor non-existence is the perfection of permanence, the Vajra-like body. The term permanence in this context is not the same as the worldly notion of permanence. Ordinary beings cling to permanence, happiness, self, and purity, while the Buddha also spoke of these terms. Why? These two sets of concepts are fundamentally different. Ordinary beings cling to a sense of self, regarding what they like as permanent, blissful, self, and pure. On the other hand, the Buddha taught impermanence, impurity, lack of happiness, suffering, and non-self. Yet, when the Buddha was about to enter nirvana, he taught permanence, bliss, self, and purity to address attachments. Shravaka practitioners cling to suffering, emptiness, impermanence, and non-self. Mahayana bodhisattvas also have such tendencies, clinging to the selflessness of persons and phenomena because the Buddha taught so. We typically cling to the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha's teachings are meant to help us overcome our attachments. It's normal to cling to the Buddha's teachings. In fact, we must do so. Otherwise, how would we practice? However, after eliminating the basic attachments, we should also let go of attachment to the Dharma. Otherwise, we cannot attain enlightenment. That's why the Buddha spoke of permanence, bliss, self, and purity to help us overcome attachment to the Dharma and inspire our faith. He told us that upon attaining Buddhahood, one becomes pure, free from defilements, and transcends the concepts of purity and impurity. Even the notion of purity is gone. This is genuine purity. The great bliss is not worldly happiness. It's not the opposite of suffering, not sensory pleasures. It is the bliss of peace. The great permanence is not the permanence we contrast with impermanence. It transcends permanence and annihilation, existence and non-existence. The great self is not the self of persons or phenomena, nor is it the self we commonly refer to. It is neither self nor non-self. It transcends self and non-self. This is the genuine great self. 4. Great self. It transcends the two extremes of conceptual elaboration, self and non-self. Mipham Rinpoche said, "One transcends the notion of self, which falls into the extreme of existence, and the notion of non-self, which falls into the extreme of emptiness." We emphasize non-self every day, countering the notion of self. In a sense, the self we cling to doesn't exist. That's why we should learn non-self. The self in person we cling to doesn't exist, and the phenomena we cling to lack inherent nature too. It transcends the worldly concepts of existence and non-existence, permanence and annihilation. One attains the transcendent self, the support of wisdom, which pacifies all conceptual elaborations and realizes the nature of all phenomena that pervades both samsara and nirvana. This state is the great self, the body of the wisdom of equality, like vast space. There is no notion of a self. However, this explanation can easily be misinterpreted by non-Buddhists. It attains freedom from all phenomena. It is the source of all undefiled qualities, such as the 10 immeasurable powers and 10 freedoms. It is the supreme basis for accomplishing the benefits of oneself and others effortlessly. The concept of the great self, also known as the Buddha nature, can only be introduced after one has realized the selflessness of persons and phenomena. Those who talk about the great self without realizing the selflessness of persons and phenomena are not following the Buddha's path. Some people start teaching the Mahaparinirvana Sutra without ensuring that their audience has the proper foundation or understanding of the selflessness of persons and phenomena. They are following a demonic or heretical path. They will interpret the Mahaparinirvana Sutra in a non-Buddhist way, and the listeners will understand it as a non-Buddhist teaching. Therefore, not everyone can listen to the sutras taught by the Buddha. Those without the proper foundation will perceive them as non-Buddhist teachings. For example, they might think what Hinduism teachings is no different from the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. However, if we have the foundation in the Buddha's first and second turnings of the Dharma wheel, when we listen to the sutras of the third turning, we won't feel confused. Hence, we must follow the stages during spiritual practice. Otherwise, we would be following a demonic or non-Buddhist path. The transcendent and unsurpassable qualities refer to permanence, bliss, self, and purity as explained above. This is a profound state that bodhisattvas attain after realizing the two kinds of selflessness. To help ordinary beings understand, it's temporarily described in this manner. For 10th stage bodhisattvas, there is no need to explain in this way. At that level, great masters don't talk about this. This teaching is aimed at ordinary beings. Why do we study the Mahaparinirvana Sutra? To understand how wonderful it is to attain Buddhahood, nurturing faith and inspiring joy. After eliminating attachments to the self in persons and phenomena, there is no need to talk about permanence, bliss, self, and purity. The middle way transcends all dualities and conceptual elaborations like permanence and annihilation, coming and going, existence and non-existence. How could it speak of permanence, bliss, self, and purity? Wouldn't that be a regression? In reality, such teachings are imparted to ordinary beings with great aspirations, to let us know how wonderful the state realized by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is. Their state is beyond the language of ordinary beings. Yet the Buddha still explained it compassionately to strengthen our faith and aspirations.